Hi everyone, so this is Trina, and as promised, we said we would launch the live Heart Talk podcast, and here we are. So I'm here to talk more about Heart Talk and how it came about. So Heart Talk is an initiative by My Heart on Me. So I am Trina, the founder and facilitator of My Heart on Me. We felt that an initiative like Heart Talk would be great to just start, simply because in a lot of things that we do, deeper relationship seems to be the thing that we go back to, and we always ask ourselves, how can we empower others to have deeper relationships with the people that they want to have with the most. So Heart Talk is just a digital purpose-driven card game where you can engage with your friends, your families, even if the timing is right, and even if you feel led, sometimes even strangers. So the mechanics of these questions is to help you engage in deeper relationships. So back to the podcast, we decided to do the podcast really because we wanted to show you how we actually engage with this in real life. How we do that is that we'll be inviting different guests onto our podcast and to just get them talking about their lives. And from a moderator's perspective, I've been led to these people through different circumstances. So today we have Rachel Fenton that will be joining us. Rachel is first and foremost a writer, but also a teacher and an actor. I'll let her talk more about her, but herself and her journey, which I find very exciting, and I can't wait to hear more about it, and can't wait for you guys to also be hearing in about it. For me, I came to know about Rachel through her article she wrote on moral revolution. I think she has taken on a new creative direction, and her calling and her motivations in life is really to find different ways to connect to people and to communicate with them in better ways. So we decided to do an Instagram live, which will later be turned into a live podcast with the audios, and just putting it on IGTV just so that everything is just on one platform. So this is our first time. If there are any glitches, if there's any if anything doesn't go as planned, I hope you guys understand. And I'll just go ahead and invite Rachel onto the podcast and see how this goes. Let's see, I just gotta get this. Let's see. Okay, I've sent an invite. Yep, we are on schedule. That's the alarm going. So really today we're here to engage with three random questions, but today it's all about intimate relationship, what that looks like with your friends, your family, and how that eventually came about for Rachel. I think for me personally, the topic about intimate relationships only came about in my life the past 3 years really. I think that came about because I was at an age and at a stage in my life where I had just got out of university, and I was beginning to understand how everything was coming in place, and just understanding that intimate relationships don't always look like what the media portrays and what people say it should be. So so I am hoping to get... Hi, Rachel. Let's see how to... Nice, okay. This is waiting. Oh, hey!
Hey!
Hi, Rachel.
Hey, sorry. I totally didn't know this was going to be like a live video, so I didn't even do my makeup. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. I have no makeup to it, I think.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, cool. So I was
Hi.
just sharing with them about how this entire podcast came about. So it's an
Mm-hmm.
initiative by My Heart on Me, which is something that I was doing while in university, and then
Mm-hmm.
this whole thing was just to really, allow people to find connection and contentment in a diverse world
Mm-hmm.
that we live in.
Mm-hmm.
And Heart Talk is an initiative coming from that. So Yeah. So I was just doing a bit of an introduction about you, but do you want to
I
just
love it.
share? Yeah. Do you want to share more about yourself and what you're
Sure.
doing, your journey thus far?
Sure.
Yeah.
So, right now I currently live in the States. I live in California, in Redding, California, which is about like 3 hours north of San Francisco. And I actually just finished my first year of ministry school,
Wow.
which was awesome. And I was actually an actor. Like I grew up wanting to be an actor, always did like a lot of theater and stuff. And then when I was in my mid-20s, I ended up moving to New York. And it was kind of around that time where just a lot was like changing in my heart. And like there was just a lot of growth around that time. Like I was like sober for 2 years and went to acting school and all of that. And then just kind of over the last couple years, there'd just been so much transition. And I started writing a lot more. And so, yeah, but like really, like in the last year, I felt like God asked me to like start writing.
Mm.
And he was like, "Hey, I'm just going to give you like a bunch of opportunities to do that." And I was like, "Okay." But then they just started like popping up.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I've been writing more this year than I ever have, which is great. Um, but yeah, so it's kind of interesting. What I keep feeling like drawn to are subjects around the heart.
Yeah.
And I feel like so much in the culture that we're in, like I was actually just thinking about this, like I feel like anything that you post on Instagram or anything that you post on Facebook, it's like not only are we posting it from a place of like, oh, I feel passionately about this, like so much like politically, or whether it's like a human rights issue or a female, you know, like a women's rights issue, like all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, there's so much, um, there's so much that like we have like just in our own heart of like being able to keep in touch with that and
Yeah.
have like a healthy heart. You know, when we're like maintaining relationships, whether it's in person, whether it's on IG Live, you know, all this kind of
Yeah.
stuff, you know, but kind of like checking like the pulse of our heart. So when you reached out to me, I was like, what a great platform. I love that. I love that. So
Yeah, I
it's a
was.
bit about me.
Yeah, it was so interesting how like I read your article on moral revolution,
Mm,
and that was
yeah.
interesting. Like just from the heading, it was honestly I think something that we don't talk about as much, like in real life, like
Mm-hmm.
maybe in the space of like creative writing and just this type of writing. I feel
Yeah.
like people or women come right out and express um, these opinions, but really just to have these kind of conversations and to
Yeah.
for people to hear that really this this topic about intimate relationships, and like for
Mm-hmm.
women to come to an intentional point in their life where they realize that you don't have to be a certain way
Yeah.
for you to pursue things that you feel led to, whether that be a person, your career,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
understanding how you're being led, understanding how you're
Yeah.
being prompted in life is different to each of us, and just having conversations around that is great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm just gonna jump into the three questions
Do it.
because yeah, okay. So the first one is what dating advice would you give yourself?
Wow. What I give myself? Like if I was younger or like me at my own age?
The first that comes to your mind.
The first thing that comes to be patient. That's like the first thing that I feel like I'm about to turn 31. And when I was in my early 20s, I was like, I'm gonna have like kids by the time I'm 30, like all this stuff, you know, and I'm a highly motivated career like person. Like I love exploring, I love traveling, but I think internally we can kind of come to a place with dating where we just get super impatient sometimes. And like that we're like, oh, why haven't I met that person? Or why are they not ready to take the step I want to take? Or, you know, even sometimes like with ourselves of like, oh, I thought that I was over this person and now I just started dating this other person and stuff is coming up in my heart and I thought I already dealt with that, you know, but just
Mm.
like be patient and like be gentle with yourself. Um, I also feel like it's really interesting. So I just started dating, well, not just started dating, we've been dating for about 2 months. A man who's Korean, he's Korean American.
Cool.
And so for me, it's like learning a lot about a culture that's very centered around unity,
Yeah.
whereas like Western culture is very all about the individual.
Yeah.
And so that's something that like I think a lot about now that I'm more aware of is like, um, how can I encourage like unity and also like independence in relationships? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it
Um,
does. It does.
yeah, and being like open-minded to like, oh, the person who I might end up dating might not look the way that I think they're going to look, or be from a culture that is like my culture, you know? And so just being open-minded too. So yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Like, after I read your article, then just connecting up with you, I've
Yeah.
I found that to be like really intriguing as well. Like,
Hmm.
um, cross-cultural relationships. Uh,
Yeah.
I'm from a place where it's multiracial. So in Singapore here, we have different races, but we
Mm-hmm.
all have lived in a country that's relatively young.
Mm-hmm.
But the huge lesson that we've been taught since a young age is to live in harmony. So
Mm-hmm.
we have days in Singapore called multiracial days.
Mm-hmm.
So that you can tell by that it's a legit like when we were in school, like we had this thing called racial harmony. So
Mm-hmm.
then yeah, so you dress up in different ethnic outfits and
Oh
to go to
wow.
school. So like me, I'm a Singaporean Chinese,
Mm-hmm.
and like I could have classmates that are Singaporean Indian or
Mm-hmm.
a Singaporean Malay. So and we're all Singaporeans. We just
Oh
look
wow.
differently from one another. So I
Mm-hmm.
find that to be interesting, but it's also really normal if you've been in it. And yeah, like I think the huge thing these days about like diversity and all like that, I
Yeah.
love that it's coming up in conversation. And I love
Yeah.
that people are actually, especially in a space of like relationships, people are coming in and they are actually putting themselves in a really intimate space to get
Mm-hmm.
to know a different culture, which is a
Yeah.
different context altogether. So how did you if you don't mind, like
Oh no,
what's
for
his
sure.
name?
Oh, his name's Dave. It's really funny. I actually just saw that he joined the conversation. I like
Yeah.
looked down there. I was like, oh my God.
Hi,
Um,
David.
Hi, Dave. He's laughing right now. I can just feel he's totally laughing right now. Yeah. What did
So
you want to ask?
yeah, how do you guys meet, and like yeah, what led you
Um,
to it?
we met through a mutual friend. Yeah, we met through a mutual friend. Like we're both in the same school, and a friend introduced us at a coffee shop, and then we just kind of like I actually reached out to him because we're both in the arts industry,
Mm.
and so sorry. And so I was like, hey, I really want to just get to know this person because we're both in film. And then, and then, yeah, long story short, we had like a coffee date and then we really hit it off. And then all of a sudden it was like, wow, I have feelings for this person. And we have like a lot in common. And he was just like incredibly like peaceful, you know?
Mm.
And, and one of the things that I actually like prayed for was like that the person who I would meet would be someone who was really emotionally healthy and like really spiritually healthy. And so that was the thing that when I met Dave, I was like, this person really has that all together. And that he already had that foundation. So like, yeah, so that was super important for me. But yeah, that's how we met.
That's
I could ramble on
lovely.
about him for like a long time, but yeah,
Yeah, that's so sweet.
yeah, yeah.
And how has it been so far, like learning about, as in for you personally? Because I'm sure, like you mentioned, like
Hmm.
growing up in a culture where it's more individual to
Yeah.
something that's more based on harmony. Like, how is that transition for you, or how's
Um,
the understanding? How has that been?
yeah, I mean, so far, I mean, it has been like, it has definitely been like a challenge, because there are times where I'm like, oh, I really want to, like, even like we're just about to like go on a trip like in about a month, and it's for like a wedding for some of his friends, and I was kind of thinking like, oh, like I actually like prayed about it, and I was like, actually, I really feel like I'm supposed to go because my mom was going to come and visit at the same time.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, like, because now I'm making a choice, like as part of like a unified couple, like in that community, then I'm like, okay, sorry. I
Yeah.
was like, I'm actually investing like, sorry, hold please, my phone is about to die. Um, I'm like, I'm actually investing because like I'm choosing I'm choosing the community. Like I'm choosing his community. Like I'm choosing to invest there than just be like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm doing my own thing and my mom is coming to visit, you know? So
Right. Yeah.
to me that honestly kind of boils down to um valuing what they value essentially, and saying like, hey, where are opportunities for me to value that person, to place value on what they value. Um yeah, and it's also like, you know, for me, I'm super all about like, oh, I would love, um, like when I think about like trips, like I think about locations
Mm.
like a lot more. And he's like, who are the people that we're going to see? Or like, you know, how can we spend time with people and all of that? And like, that's what's super important. Not that that's not important for me, but
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes I'm so much in my own head, and I can be such like, come from such like an individualistic place. I have to keep in mind like, oh, like he's trying to connect to people.
Yeah.
And, you know, does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. Like the value
So,
of like that people connection and reaching out and just like making that space to join in with other people rather than it being
yeah,
just, like a trip that it's like yeah, like going for a holiday. Like yeah, I totally get that. I totally get that.
yeah,
I think
yeah.
if anything, in my relationship, we're sort of like the reverse. We met
Hmm.
in university as well. So that was, I mean, we're still learning. It's like four
Yeah.
years in, and then
Oh, cool.
it's still like a lot to take in. So we did long distance right from the start, and that was for 3 years. And
Hmm.
this is the first year without long distance, and it's,
Oh, wow.
I would say just adjusting to long distance was easier than like now what it is being in the same country.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna go to the next question.
Go for it.
Yeah. How do you best receive love?
Um, Probably, are you like a love languages person? Do you know all the love languages?
I do.
Okay.
Whether I abide and like
Yeah.
follow it religiously,
Yeah,
no.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I would say like I best receive love through like words of affirmation. So that's like one of the love languages.
Yeah.
I'm totally a words person. Um, but I used to think that I was quality time, but I go back and forth between like quality time and acts of service.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because like I used to not think of acts of service as something that I place like a lot of value on. But as I got a little bit older, and also when I moved to Reading and I didn't have my dad there, you know, or like neighbors, you know, who are like super helpful, I was like, oh, when someone did me a favor, I was like, wow, I really feel loved on. You know, even if it's someone
Yeah.
who's like, hey, I bought you a coffee, or hey, I actually just took care of the dishes for you, you know, or whatever it is, you know, like a
Yeah.
roommate. I was like, wow, I feel really loved because that person was intentional with their time. And I feel like at the end of the day, like love is it's best communicated through intentionality, whether you're intentionally like holding that person, or, you know, spending time with them, or, you know, whatever, giving them time to themselves because you know that that's what they need.
Yeah.
But yeah, but I love words. I love words.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Is
What
it
about you?
high on that list?
It's super high. It's
Okay.
super high. Yeah.
I'm an ex person, but I've been that way. Like I know for different people, if you take like the brief assessment, like every 6 months it
Hmm.
changes, or if it's really
Yeah.
close, it kind of swaps over. But X for me has been like the top, and everything else is like a single digit like number.
Hmm.
But X of service is almost like maxed out, and I think
Hmm.
that for me it comes from like upbringing, because words and quality time, like culturally, it's not something it's not something that people talk a lot about. It's not something we see a
Mm-hmm.
lot in school or like, just with our parents, with friends.
Yeah.
Like, you don't hear, oh, like you're a great person or like you're amazing. Like you don't hear like, oh, good job that,
Mm.
you managed to, um, raise these two kids, that kind of thing. Like it only comes
Yeah.
at rare moments. But it's not that people aren't able to say it. They can say it, but I think they feel it and then they internalize it and then they respect them through their acts and just being
Interesting.
there for them.
Mm.
I would say maybe that's more like an Asian thing.
Okay.
Maybe there's a play between like um, pride and just like your
Mm.
upbringing, your childhood. Like not if you have not been exposed to it, why would you ever
Yeah.
be that way? Um, yeah. So in school as well, like it's the same. So if you're and something interesting I found about recently was that by the age of 5, you kind of develop a lot of your adult behavior already,
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in terms of your mental capacity and also your emotional capacity. So
Mm.
like later on in adulthood, I think it comes up because more real life circumstances have led to it surfacing, and also because you want to be more intentional of yourself. And often by a certain stage of life, especially after, I feel after the entire school system where you
Yeah.
don't know what is next, and maybe working and your career and your passions are lifelong at this point. So
Mm-hmm.
then things generally don't go as expected because there's nothing paved for you. Nobody says that life goes on this way and it has to be the same for everyone. Like it's always different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so because of that and the mismatch of expectations, like I think people internalize a lot. Like a lot is in um, they struggle to sit with their vulnerabilities and their
Mm.
struggles and challenges and reach out to another person, maybe even being in that space of
Mm.
brokenness.
Mm-hmm.
So again, like maybe for me, like I see acts of service also as like reaching out to people. Like
Yeah.
yeah, so but there's always like tension points, even in my relationship. And I think only 3 years ago I realized that the whole love languages thing, it is equally important to know the other person's and to follow
For
that.
sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely important. I think, yeah, you made a lot of really great points with what you had just said. You were talking about like within your own culture and acts of service and that and internalizing that instead of and letting that show like letting love show up through an act as opposed to like words. And that's interesting, like because I definitely like I just a couple weeks ago I went and spent like a good chunk of time with my boyfriend's family, and I was like, this is really interesting, like how they show love and how they receive love. And like my family talks all the time, but I'm like, but sometimes you can talk a lot, but not really say that much. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
And yeah, but it's also super important, like as you talked about learning the other person's love language, because my love languages and his love languages are completely different. Um, but it's good because then you kind of get to that place of like coming back to what I'd said earlier about unity over the
Yeah.
individual, not necessarily always over, but like once you decide to like link arms with somebody,
Yeah.
really, then it's like, okay, um, that means that I have to make space for like how you're loved, and to be intentional with that and to acknowledge that and yeah, like even if in like the smallest ways, I'm like, oh, if I can just find a way to show them that like I love them,
Yeah.
when they least expect it, if it's like just like if it's physical touch, just like making sure that I'm reaching out and holding their hand, or
Yeah.
if it's acts of service, just like surprising them with like, hey, like I just, did this really nice thing for you, or like I took out your trash and you didn't ask me to, or whatever that is.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sure, like, sometimes I think for people, the focus tends to fall more on their love language just because that's all they've
Yeah.
ever known. And to
Right.
explore another person's love language and what that looks like is like just this fresh canvas of learning. Yeah, which I'm kind of thankful in a way that in Singapore at least, like
Mm,
there's this huge push for a young country to learn lifelong. So
mm,
having that in a Asian context is just huge because if like for a lot of the older generation, they've not really been pushed to learn lifelong. They've been pushed
mm,
to just survive.
mm.
So if you are on survival mode, you don't tend to think so much about like we're very like I definitely feel privileged to be able to think about these
Mm.
things, love
Yeah.
languages. In their time, it probably was
Mm.
non-existent. It doesn't make
Yeah.
sense. But we are in a time where these things bring people together, and these things help to um, not let so much of the challenges that have constantly been happening for so many people carry
Yeah.
on. And if we can learn how to love another person the way that they best receive love, then that's really powerful, and that can be really healing as well.
So true. So true. And I think even too, like outside of a romantic context, looking at parents, like, my dad and I we have similar love languages, but our capacity is different,
Yeah,
and like his capacity for like the kinds of words of affirmation that he wants to hear are different than what I want to hear.
yeah,
And like, like me talking to my dad about the weather is like really significant with him. But for
yeah.
me, I'm like, I hate talking about the weather. But for him, it's like,
Okay.
oh, my daughter is trying to connect with me on something that is just simple and easy and fun. And like, even if it's just simple, and
Yeah,
so for me, actually going like listening on the phone to him talking about the weather forecast for the next 7 days is actually me like saying, I love you.
yeah,
Even though I'm like, I could easily get on my phone and like look it up, for him, that's significant. So I think it's like, okay, not just in romantic relationships, but also like in our friendships and our relationships with our parents. Like, are we being intentional about how we love them? And even if it's the same love language, are we making space for what that looks like with them? You
yeah,
know? And also like not judging ourselves when we get it wrong, like
yeah,
if our thing is acts of service, but someone makes us like dinner and it tastes horrible, like
yeah,
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 like just saying thank you, but then like,
yeah.
like
I totally agree with
they
that.
don't have to do it
Making
next
a lot of
time.
space. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Gotta be like, there has to be a lot of like graciousness around,
A
like,
lot of grace.
yeah, a lot of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just gonna go to the third
Go for
question.
it.
The third one is describe what a healthy, intimate relationship looks like to you. Maybe talking a bit about friends and
Okay.
yeah, and maybe also in your relationship.
Yeah. So, wow. The first word that comes to my mind is vulnerability. And I don't really think that we can be intimate with people unless we're vulnerable. And I think that like having healthy intimacy with friends, like I like to think of like my heart as having multiple different rings around it. So like when people are in the very center ring, like the very center spot of my heart, like only like for me, that spot is like reserved for God, like my higher power. But then outside that are like my best friend, and then outside that and like the person I'm dating, and then outside that it's like friendships who that are really really special to me, but maybe don't get to that really deep place in my heart. So I think like for me with a healthy intimacy, it's like being able to be vulnerable with those people, but also knowing like where they're at in my heart, like
Yeah.
that there might be certain people who get to see me in certain spaces, or that I can talk to you about certain issues. And then there are people who I'm like, I can be honest with them and truthful, and we can have a great intimate conversation, but they're not going to be the person who I call when like hell freezes over.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, but I think so definitely vulnerability. And that's the same in my romantic relationship too.
Yeah.
Um, there's kind of a certain point at which it's like, um, you have to be okay with that person seeing you on like your worst day.
Yeah.
And, I think that like also as an actor and as a writer, for me, it's easy to kind of get lost in sometimes what I want people to see of me instead of allowing them to really see me.
Yeah.
And like with my partner Dave, it's like there's none of that. Like there's no hiding. Um, and so and I think there's also like with healthy intimacy in friendships and in relationships, it's like also knowing when we need to like step away and recharge.
Yeah.
You know, like knowing whether or not um, you're an introvert or extrovert. It's like, you know, even if you're an extrovert, meaning like you get really recharged by being around people, um, there's still also a time and place to be alone. And likewise, like with like I'm an introvert, so I recharge when I get alone. But that also means like I'm recharging to be around people. So if I've kind of found myself in a place with intimate relationships where I'm feeling super burnt out, whether I'm extroverted or introverted, like I need to make sure that I'm recharging,
Yeah.
that, you know, that I'm like checking in with myself and not placing like the weight of my emotional health on anybody else. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, it totally does. I think too often that happens. And again, just to bring up like just giving a lot of grace over that as well, because I think
Yeah.
for a lot of people, when that happens, then things just boil over and like
Hmm.
conflict happens. But
Yeah.
conflict also can provide an opportunity to learn, I feel. So
Absolutely.
if maybe in the past you used to react to this certain thing and you never really gave yourself the space to
Mm-hmm.
recuperate and to really just settle and to find some sort of peace with the situation, I think
Mm-hmm.
a lot of that generally is overlooked. But the next time it happens, you kind of know better, and you kind of know,
Yeah.
yeah, you kind of know that this is something that you don't have to react this way about, and just giving yourself the space to calm down and to um, get the emotions settled so that you can connect your heart and head, or the other way,
Yeah.
whichever that you operate. And that I think the whole topic on like connecting your head and heart intentionally
For
is super
sure.
important for what a healthy relationship looks like.
For sure.
Yeah. I love
Yeah. I
how
mean, oh,
I
sorry,
love
go
how
ahead.
you mentioned about the vulnerability thing,
Mm-hmm.
and like in the intimate relationship of like a partner, it's really at the end of the day, it's really them seeing you at your worst. uh,
Yeah.
I want to unpack a bit more about how that looks like with friends, because I think for so many people out there, being vulnerable with friends comes with a lot of pride as well. Like they think that they're being vulnerable, but really, they don't really want to show their worst sides, or like
Mm.
even if it's even if it's anger or like sadness, like they kind of keep it in, and maybe they are alone and they are just struggling with that all by themselves. But yet
Yeah.
maybe this person would say like, oh yeah, I have best friends and I have people that I can turn to. But in truth, and just being real about it, in your lowest points, are you able to reach out to this person? So what advice would you
Right.
give to these people? Like,
Wow. That's such a great question. Um, hmm. I feel like when we're in the place where we don't want to be vulnerable, or when we're afraid um, to expose maybe that part of ourselves, I think like a really good question to ask is what am I afraid of? Like what am I really afraid is going to happen? You know, like do I really think that this person is going to reject me? Do I think that they will you know, see something about me that that makes me completely disgusting to them? And most of the time it's like no, but I think that a fear of rejection can really drive some of our like craziest behavior, you know? Because most of the time I feel like we refuse to show people those ugly, right? Those ugly parts of ourselves because we're afraid that they are going to reject us and that they're going to see something and they're going to want to walk away. But I think that like there are honestly certain I feel like that's such a beautiful test for friendship though. You know, like I mean, so like just a bit about me, like about maybe about like a year and a half ago, like I went through a broken engagement. And in that time, like between when that happened and then when I ended up moving to California, there were a lot of friends who um, I got, uh, some of them I got really close to, and some of them just kind of like fell away. But a lot of it was because like people weren't able to deal with me being in a really tough spot, you know? Um, and I think that like that ability though, when I was just completely vulnerable with people and needing community and needing love and needing compassion, it's like people either could do it or they couldn't. You know,
Yeah.
people were really challenged by um, just like the rawness of that situation. And I think my family was too, you know? But now, like the friends who stuck with me through that, I'm like, they're tried and true, you know? And
Yeah.
so I think that like if, you know, if someone was struggling with like, hey, how do I stay vulnerable? How do I stay real? It's like first, um, first, like real friends are the ones who stick with you when, you know,
The
when it
going
gets really tough. Yeah, when the going gets tough, you know? Um, and and who are compassionate. You know, honestly, I'm like I'm super attracted to compassion, super
Mhm.
attracted to it, you know. Um and so and then the second thing is like really what are you afraid of? You know, worst case scenario, like you fall on your face or you fail or whatever, but it's like we have to be willing to fail in front of friends. We have to be willing to have the conversation of hey, we went out to dinner the other night and you know, ran out on the check for like the sixth time in a row and I had to
Yeah.
pay. And like,
Yeah.
we need to talk about like, did you really forget your debit card? Or like, are you really not doing okay with money? Like, what's going on? Or
Yeah.
like a friend who is, hey, like, um, you know, I know that you love like to have fun, but like I see you drinking all the time and it just really feel like you're hiding something from me. And, you know, sometimes brave doesn't look like us showing people the ugly side of ourselves. Sometimes that looks like actually confronting in love, like,
Yeah.
hey, I need to address what's happening here.
Yeah.
And sometimes we confront and people get freaked out or people, you know, don't want to be our friend anymore. And that happens when you're 16 and it happens when you're 30, you know,
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, it
but
happens definitely. But in that
yeah.
space, you you find an intimate relationship that you
Yeah,
can't necessarily find anywhere else. You can't necessarily
yeah,
call um, this best friend of yours, and you can't characterize the relationship as intimate if you have not been your lowest, or if you have not
yeah,
truly expressed what makes you unhappy or what
yeah,
makes you sad. I think
yeah,
that's a real tragedy if we can't do that. And I definitely resonate with the fear of doing that. Maybe growing up, I was quick to address, uh,
mm,
and of course that has led to, as you mentioned, like people falling
mm,
away, and not also acknowledging or owning up to the fact that it always takes two hands to clap. So even
yeah,
if one person is bringing it up, yes, you may look like the one who is the bad guy, but really you are opening up a space for conversation. And
yeah,
conversation is so important because it can't just be one way, or it can't be just on the surface. If you really want
yeah,
to have a strong relationship or a healthy relationship, being healthy on a mental or emotional level definitely looks like sitting with hard stuff and good
yeah,
stuff, like if it's all good and never really bad, then what really is life? I think so
yeah,
often, yeah, media and everything just portrays this positive and optimistic outlook, but really I found one of the greatest lessons to be that it's okay not to be okay, and it's okay to let people into that space.
yeah, absolutely. You totally hit the nail on the head. I mean, and also with what you said earlier about conflict, like that, like so often we're so afraid to go through conflict with people. Like no one ever really loves going through conflict. Like you know, like I can have tough conversations, but I don't like super look forward to addressing hard issues with people. I don't think anybody really does,
Yeah, yeah,
maybe some people, but it's like we have to learn how to address conflict. We have to be willing to say, hey, we might disagree, but also like really beautiful, healthy, intimate relationships with friends. It also looks like, you know, knowing that I'm not getting my value from that person. I'm not getting my identity from that person. I'm not depending on that person to like be my rock. And, there's definitely a time and place to like lean on friendships, but there's also something to be said about knowing how to give people space and how to navigate like a healthy, fun relationship with a friend. Like I feel like sometimes we can get to this place with friends where it almost feels like codependent.
yeah,
And, and I think that can be a challenge too. Like honestly, like as I've gotten older and stayed single, it's like, or unmarried, it's like, okay, how do I navigate relationships with women, like with female friends, but not let it get to a codependent place where I'm like leaning on them for the intimacy that I long for with a guy, or I'm spending
yeah,
so much time like, and like I love my time with my girlfriends, but there's also like if I start to feel like I'm spending time with people just because I have a need that needs to get met, that's not getting met,
yeah,
or I'm upset about something or I'm sad about something and actually feel like it's an invitation to process that, then I need to go process that, and but yeah, I mean, there's so many facets that create a healthy, intimate friendship. But I think that really coming back to vulnerability and having boundaries and yeah, just being willing to say like, yeah, let's talk about it, you know, um, and being open, super
yeah,
important.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's beautiful. Like, yeah, I feel like we can go on all day. To
I
be
know we
honest,
could.
yeah, we really could.
Yeah,
I think this topic is just really timely. Like even for myself,
yeah,
it's like, just hearing how like different people are not um, necessarily having their needs met, and they think they are
hmm,
trying to meet it through like busying themselves or like
yeah,
constantly reaching out to people. I think it's beautiful that people's hearts are so much so that they want to connect, but the
yeah,
how and the learn, like how do we learn to do it better, and how can we understand that in order to connect better with people, we really need
yeah,
to connect with ourselves first, because you can't switch the priorities of other
yeah,
people being greater than yourself. And what a time
absolutely.
that we can talk about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think too, like also coming back to, um, like, what does that look like to lay our lives down for our friends while simultaneously having a value for our own life, And
Yeah.
um, I think also like coming back to that topic again of like like the unity versus an independent self, and what that like holding those two in tandem and knowing that there's like a time and place for both, but
Yeah.
also being like, like you said, and um, yeah, but I forget who said it. I was just talking to, I think I was talking to my boyfriend about this the other day, and I don't know who said it, but it's like if you but just talking about being part of a pack and talking about like the endurance that comes with being part of a pack, that you might be able to go. I'm going to mess up the quote. I'm not even going to say it. I shouldn't have even started it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyways, the point is to be in community. Okay,
Yeah.
that's the whole
That's right.
point.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I'm like, I would rather, at this point, I'm like, I love exploring by myself and I love like taking trips and all that kind of stuff and having time away. But I also feel like the one thing that can sometimes actually hinder me in relationships with people is feeling like, um, what if I give too much of myself? And that's actually on me. That
Mm.
means that like I haven't checked in with myself, and I'm
Yeah.
like, what does that really look like to check in with myself and to know when I'm at full capacity, you know? And to know though that even if I get stretched, that I can still come back the next day and be like, okay, I can get recharged too, that it can just be, day to day. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. And every day there's something to learn, and there's something to explore. about
Yeah.
ourselves and what's going on around us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much
Oh my
for
God, thank you.
spending time. I think Instagram is really it's like double edged, you know, like it's a great place to connect if you know there are things that you're after, but it's also like this
Yeah,
place where we have to be really intentional to create spaces like these for
yeah,
people to just come on board and to listen in. So just want to thank
absolutely.
you for dialing in.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Um, is there any way if people wanted to connect with your work, like how can they connect with
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, so my my Instagram handle, it's just Rachel Fenton underscore. And then I have articles that I post like on my not well on my feed, but also like there's a little link for the website.
Yeah.
So all my stuff, I usually am pretty good about updating that. But a couple friends of mine recently, they were like, "Hey, don't you have a blog, like your own blog? You should write for that." And I'm like, "Yeah, I should. I'm gonna get back to that." So pretty soon, I should have some more stuff up there. But Instagram is a great way to connect with me for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cool. Okay. So
All
people, if you
right.
want to connect more with Rachel, you can just follow her on Instagram and she'll post
Hmm.
updates there. Thank you,
Nice.
Rachel, for joining us.
Thank
This
you.
has been great. Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
Right.
Bye.
Take care.
You too. Okay.
Okay, so thank you everyone. For those that like jumped in later on, we just talked a lot about what intimate relationships look like in a friendship context and a intimate like space with your boyfriend or partner, and with family. So we'll post this more on IGTV later. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time. Bye.